Hey guys, in this Haze guide, we'll be going into depth on how to use Haze and what different types of ways to build her out. As you climb rank, just doing the same build every time won't cut it, and you need to adapt to the situations handed to you. In this guide, I'll dive deep into how items synergize with her, what are some optimal early game items, and then into some very situational end game builds, as well as what ability order you should be thinking about and how to deal with enemies that counter you. Before we get into strategy and abilities, I do want to dive into items first, as that will give you a great understanding of how they work with her toolkit. I think the first thing to really talk about is Lucky Shot. Lucky Shot does not proc with her ult. And if we test this out, on each test I have some early and mid game items, but on the left side I have Lucky Shot, and on the right side I have High Velocity Mag. Both of these items add a flat 18% weapon damage. The only difference is Lucky Shot has a chance to do bonus damage. As you can see, the damage is exactly the same on both sides, 3,676, meaning none of the Lucky Shots have procced. But why do you see so many Hazes use Lucky Shot? And why is it in every guide? The answer is, it is probably one of the biggest tier 4 weapons for your left click, as when it does proc, it also adds a fixation stack. So you are roughly getting 35% more fixation stacks with your left click while also pumping a ton of damage. And this is important to get because if you rely on your ulti too much, the enemy team will start to play around it. Another item that you see in just about every Haze guide is Tesla Bullets. Now, Tesla Bullets also doesn't work in her ulti. As you can see, I haven't upgraded my fixation, and when I ulti with Tesla Bullets, 0 purple numbers pop up, indicating no Tesla Bullets have procced. It adds 14% fire rate, which is nice, but for a tier 3 item, that is pretty costly when you can just get burst fire or escalating resilience. But here's the damage Tesla Bullets adds in the early to mid game when you get Tesla Bullets and Ricochet together. The fixation is adding about 73 damage per proc, totaling 219 per target. The Tesla Bullets proc itself is adding about 16% spirit damage to the main target with body shots only, and about 42% spirit damage to the jump targets. And that's because Ricochet does less damage when it jumps, and Tesla Bullets does more damage when it jumps. The downside of Tesla Bullets, other than it not working in Bullet Dance, is that it is only an 8-meter range from the target you are hitting, or it could be 10-meter range with improved reach, whereas Ricochet has a 14-meter range or even a 17.5-meter range with improved reach. I usually don't get Tesla Bullets anymore, as it does take away time from getting Ricochet earlier. However, I did go down a huge rabbit hole with Tesla Bullets synergizing with Mystic Slow. In case you were ever wondering about this combination, Mystic Slow adds a 40% fire rate reduction to enemies when you do spirit damage to them. And the reason I would get Tesla Bullets with this is that, yes, fixation does do spirit damage, but only every 20 stacks, and the maximum number of stacks you can get per target is 70, so realistically you're only getting 3 procs. And Mystic Slow only lasts for 2 seconds, but with Tesla Bullets, the debuff will stay on them forever. And you might even go down another rabbit hole thinking about getting this for the movement slow to keep them in your bullet dance longer, when yes, Mystic Slow, slowing bullets, and even point blank all work in your ultimate and slow the enemies down. But you have to take into consideration that almost every hero gets enduring speed, which gives a 40% slow resist. And let's be real, when you do a bullet dance, people don't run out of it, they dash out of it. So getting into a slow build to keep them in your ulti isn't nearly as good as just getting more fire rate or damage to secure the kills. And I have tried this slow build maybe like 10 games in a row, and it was really bad, so I gave up on it entirely and just went back to damage. But is Mystic Slow any good with the 40% fire rate reduction? Well, to test this out, I had to use Withering Whip, which also reduces fire rate by 40%, because if I use Tesla Bullets, it would be equipped to the bot and sandbox that is mimicking me, so I didn't really know any other way to get an accurate test. And since Withering Whip also reduces bullet resist by 14%, I added an Echo Shard for the passive 16% bullet resist, as this was the closest I can get without adding damage. And on the right side, I'm only using improved bullet armor while passively equipping Withering Whip just for the 8% fire rate to balance it out. On the left, Withering Whip took 200 damage, while Improved Bullet on the right took 147 damage. But let's scale this up and add a bunch of weapon damage and fire rate items to see how it is in late game, excluding stuff like Lucky Shot that has RNG. So with Withering Whip on the left side, it took 2,275 damage, while Improved Bullet Armor on the right took 1,556 damage, which is a pretty big difference. So I don't think it's really worth doing Tesla Bullets and Mystic Slow, as it takes up 2 item slots, it is really expensive, and it just isn't that effective at all. And in general, I just don't see a great use for Tesla Bullets, because in the test I showed you, that was fairly early, kind of like mid-game, where they are stronger, but Tesla Bullets tends to taper off as the game goes on, and when we later get into the loadout, you'll see what other items I do get, and that we do have a limited amount of weapon slots available. And moving on to another item that is heavily slept on, and I never see other Hazes use it, Slowing Hex. I think early and mid game it is pretty clutch, as it will silence the enemy from using any movement abilities while also slowing their dashes. The reason why this is great in a lot of situations is because when you are ganking in the early mid game, you don't have Ricochet and you don't have a maxed out bullet dance, so your ulti is most effective when focusing one target at a time, as it will focus all the shots on them rather than spreading the damage to multiple targets. And when you go in for an ulti gank, the moment you press 4, the most common reaction the enemy will have is to dash away, or use a movement ability like Lash's Grapple, or even stop your ulti with an Abram Shoulder Charge. The abilities that Slowing Hex will silence are Wraith's Project Mind, Dynamo's Quantum Entanglement, Infernus's Flame Dash, Kelvin's Ice Path, Lash's Grapple, Abram's Shoulder Charge, Pocket's Flying Cloak, Shiv's Slice and Dice, Yamato's Flying Strike, and it will even prevent Grey Talon and Vindicta from flying into the air. Those are 11 out of 21 characters, which means it pretty much stops about half of the character's movement abilities in the game, while also preventing Abram from charging you out of your ulti. 2 abilities that it surprisingly does not silence are Warden's Willpower and Moe's Burrow. This item tends to pay for itself really fast, as it secures a lot of kills, and it's great because usually there are not that many spirit items that Haze gets, making this an easy pickup in most situations. One more item I want to talk about is Active Reload. It is an insanely good item for the cost, but I didn't put it in my build as it is just preference. I always forget to shoot my bullets before going into stealth, then reloading before my ulti to activate it, so I just stopped getting it. It is a very strong item for the cost, and I do recommend that you do use it. Just after many matches, I preferred Kinetic Dash more, as the uptime is way higher. I naturally do dash jumps before I ulti, and the 5% fire rate from Kinetic Dash adds more to my ulti than the 10% damage from Active Reload. I find that I usually never have lifesteal problems, and the reload on Active Reload feels just okay now that I've gotten really comfortable with sliding. And Quicksilver Reload on my Dagger is enough ammo to play with in just about any situation. So with all that said, let's get into the actual loadout here. One thing to note is that Haze is considered one of the worst laning heroes in the game, and what I've learned is that it pays off to play aggressively. Every time I bought regen and sustain items first, I found myself hiding behind my shop and constantly being pushed to my Guardian. Once I started getting aggressive items, I was able to create space and boost my economy. And the best way to start is by getting Sleep Dagger first, so 1, you can either escape a bad situation, or 2, go in for a charged melee, which does a ton of damage in the very early stages of the game. I've found to use it on enemies that try to melee creeps, just to let them know I will punish them for that. Once I unlocked Fixation, I learned the first perk right away, as it does a nice burst of spirit damage every 20 stacks. This is when I really can start harassing the enemy hero. I buy a headshot booster first, since Haze has one of the best left clicks in the game for getting passive headshots, while also trying to get 20 stacks constantly. Then I do get Ammo Scavenger as a second item, which you might be thinking of getting Extra Spirit, since Spirit gives Haze ammo and Extra Spirit also gives regen, but The extra 2 bullets every time I confirm or deny an orb has been overall more successful because I'm not missing last hits with a badly timed reload. However, there are times where I just get obliterated by a ton of spammable abilities, and getting extra regen might be viable, and I might even get extra spirit for the regen only if I'm not going to get slowing hex this game, but I usually don't go overkill on sustain since I start to shine more in the mid game and even way more in the late game. The main order I get items is headshot booster, ammo scavenger, extra stamina, rapid rounds, sprint boots, swift striker, and bullet lifesteal. The only time I really break this is by getting Swift Striker earlier, as it is an insane passive boost of DPS for the cost, and the reason I do get extra stamina before rapid rounds is it is only a 2% fire rate difference, but adds an entire stamina, which is just really good. One thing to add is that if you are duo laning with, let's say, an Abram or Warden, I find it extremely fun to actually get Spirit Strike or melee lifesteal, because your Dagger can create some great setups for these two, and you both have good melee toolkits. I wouldn't say this is meta by all means, but I think it's just great fun, and I do recommend trying it at least once. Somewhere around the 10-minute mark, the laning phase will end, and we are getting into mid-game. And the most common strategy I take here is building my economy by any means possible. If no one is running the Spirit Urn, I will try to do that since it nets a ton of souls, not just to me, but the entire team. I believe the first urn nets around 3,500 souls, and a bunch of orbs will spawn as well. The first urn spawns at the 10-minute mark, and every 5-minute increment after that, being 15 minutes, 20 minutes, etc. Also, don't forget to use the teleporter to get to the Spirit Urn faster, which are placed on each side of the map. One thing about Haze is she naturally runs really fast, and she has Smoke Bomb, increasing her sprint speed even more, so she makes a great candidate for urn delivery. And during the mid game, I will focus on 5 things at this point in highest priority to lowest. First, clearing waves that I've built up in the lanes using zipline boost on cooldown. Second, clearing jungle creeps as much as possible. Third, running the urn if it is a viable option. Fourth, taking out enemy guardians, even if it means backdooring to get the flex spot. And lastly, ganking enemy heroes. And the reason I usually put ganking at the end is that Haze will tend to have a lot of unsecured souls in the mid game just from jungling. So if you were to die trying to gank, not only will you lose those souls, but most likely the enemy hero will gain them, making a horrible trade. So when I do gank, I usually don't do it alone, and I try to do it after I spent my souls. And it's really good to find a friend that has crowd control. If your ally gets a single stun or snare on them just for your ulti, the success rate on that kill goes up dramatically. The most common order I get my mid-game items are Quicksilver Reload, Flowing Hex, which is optional or situational, Kinetic Dash, Bullet Resist Shredder, and then Enduring Speed. And I will get Ricochet at any point if I'm just having a great farm, as it will increase my economic speed at an incredible rate, making it really easy to get the other items. If I do get an early Ricochet, I usually focus more on farming and less on ganking. After you have your mid-game items and Ricochet, you want to decide between Unstoppable or Silencer versus getting more damage. If the enemy team is just shutting down your ulti, like they have a Mo, Abrams, or Ivy, you definitely will need to get an Unstoppable to even be able to use your ulti in team fights. The other option around this is by getting Silencer, which shines a lot more because it can stop enemies from stunning you, but at the same time, it'll stop them from escaping or using abilities like McGinnis's Wall or Lady Geist Health Swap or Yamato's ulti. Usually if they have both a Lady Geist and a Yamato on their team, I'm 100% getting a Silencer. Something to note is that Mo's disarm, or any disarm for that matter, will never affect your ulti. It doesn't matter if they disarm you before or during Bullet Dance, it has zero effect. And also Paradox's Wall will not do anything against your ulti either. But if you are using Bullet Dance pretty freely, adding DPS is really key. There are 3 main choices I pick, and I'm mostly thinking about how many flex spots I have, how is my economy, am I team fighting or farming more, and how much room I have on weapon and vitality slots. I'll showcase all three side by side, organized by price, and I'll explain the items after we see the damage. The one on the left side is the cheapest option with a combination of Veiled Walker and Combat Barrier. The middle one is a combination of Burst Fire and Escalating Resilience, and the one on the right is Glass Cannon. Sure, the one in the middle does the most overall damage, and it can do even more. You see, there is a Reddit out there saying that Burst Fire is activated by your ulti, but I really think that isn't true. The test I showed you earlier was 4700 damage, but in this clip, the way to activate it is by left-clicking an enemy hero and only a hero. It won't work with creep or jungle, so I'll shoot one far away and then use my ulti, and you'll notice I did 50-70 damage, which is a 370 increase just from left-clicking a hero, so that is something to think about. I don't think it's that big of a deal, as timing your ulti is a much bigger priority than the extra boost of damage, but I do like getting this combo the most as it is fairly passive unlike Veiled Walker and doesn't lower my HP like Glass Cannon. Instead, it adds bullet resist and increases my slide distance, which makes me much better at chasing down enemies. One thing to note is that Escalating Resilience will only add bullet resist with your left click and not with your ulti, which isn't a big deal since Bullet Dance gives 50% evasion anyways. The second highest damage was Veiled Walker and Combat Barrier, which also was the cheapest option. How Veiled Walker works is you have to run through these fog walls to activate it. It does have an 18-second cooldown, but it refills all your shields, gives you a move speed bonus for 5 seconds, and also a 20% fire rate buff for your next magazine or for 16 seconds, which will also work in your ulti. When paired with Combat Barrier, you will have a total of 28% fire rate and 28% weapon damage. On top of that, they will give you a 500 bullet shield, which is pretty damn crazy considering you can fill it every 18 seconds. The downside is you are constantly looking for fog walls. The third option, which was the most expensive and added the least damage, can actually add the most damage of all of them. Every time you kill an enemy hero, you gain a 10% weapon damage buff up to a maximum of 7 stacks, so it can be an additional 70%, making this one item alone give you 158% weapon damage on top of the 10% fire rate. But when this item is maxed out, you will go from 4,505 damage to 5,709, an additional 1,204 damage. The choice you pick is entirely up to you on how you want to play it out. But usually at this point, when I have my Ricochet, my damage output, and either Silencer or Unstoppable, there usually comes situational problems that need to be fixed. Let's say the enemy in Furnace or Abrams is a big problem on their team. Getting anti-heal items would be a great solution, and Healbane is a good choice being that it is not a weapon slot and is very affordable. It does last for 6 seconds on proc and only procs on spirit damage. So from a Bullet Dance perspective, you're looking at it lasting a total of about 6 to 8 seconds, plus the proc you get from your Sleeping Dagger. So I personally get Toxic Bullets in most cases because it is just an overall better choice, as it does proc faster and will stay on the enemy as long as you keep attacking them, both with left click and your ulti. It also has a much higher healing reduction than Healbane, going from 40% to 65%. The other choice is Decay, which is great if you are low on item space, but it is an active item, so you will have to choose who to use it on. If there are multiple self-healers on their team, I probably will go Healbane or Toxic Bullets, or even both. And there are situations where you are dealing with a Vindicta, Grey Talon, or 7 ulti, and the only way for you to get them out of the air or stop the 7 ult is by using Knockdown. Yes, you can use Sleeping Dagger on Grey Talon and Vindicta, but at some point in the game, they just start moving faster in the air and it becomes rather difficult to time. It is usually another hero that should get knocked down so you can focus on DPS items, but I end up getting it anyway. And it is actually really nice to use on someone that is running away from you, as it has a very huge range and can give you just the time to get in and follow up with a Sleep Dagger. Also, the 1 stamina on it is kind of nice. Some other items to consider are Silence Glyph or Curse. These are usually really good counters to Yamato or Lady Geist. Their ultis tend to just shut you down in a 1v1. Curse is just an overall really good item to have late game. Inhibitor is kind of a very late game survival item. Also, if CC is really destroying me in the early game, I will consider picking up a reactive barrier, usually aimed towards a Wraith ult, a Mo ult, or even an Infernus ult. Ethereal Shift is also another great item at a higher cost, but it can also save you from stuff like a Grey Talon ult or Bebop's bombs. And the only time I really get Leech is when I'm super maxed out and want to replace Bullet Lifesteal, as Bullet Lifesteal is 5 times cheaper with only 7% less Leech. I find that Vampiric Burst is just a much better item to get than Leech, depending on how many active items you're thinking about this match. And if the enemies are getting return fire to counter your ult, Vampiric Burst is the best item against that. And Superior Stamina is an overall really good item to get. I think the best situations, though, are when they have a McGinnis, because it pretty much lets you jump over her wall. Another good situation is to get out of Warden's Binding Word. But even outside of this scope, it is just a great item to get for mobility in general. I would put more priority on it if you are aiming for a left-click build rather than a bullet dance build. Other than that, I pick it up when I can. And you can always get improved reach and superior cooldown if you want to play more around your ulti. But let's get into the abilities really quick. This picture is an order in which I learned my abilities. I used to always get fixation at level 1, but I've learned that harassing enemies really doesn't start until I get the first perk for the extra spirit damage, on top of getting headshot boosters, so now I actually get Sleep Dagger first, as not only will it save my life, but I can also go in for a free charged melee. So in a nutshell, how you want to learn your abilities is get the base of Sleep Dagger, then learn Fixation and get perks 1 and 2. Then you want to pick up the base of Smoke Bomb whenever you can. Learn the base of your ulti next, followed by the first perk, because that one ability point will boost your ulti damage on a solo target from about 800 damage to 1200 damage, where the 5 ability points to max Fixation will bring your ulti from 800 to 1000, which is a rough estimate at this stage of the game. After the first perk of your ulti, get the final perk of Fixation, then max out your Bullet Dance, which usually you should be able to get Ricochet around the same time, and if you don't feel bad, I've been there before. Now your Bullet Dance is somewhat good enough to be used in team fights, and then get the first 2 perks on your Dagger to lower its cooldown, then max out your Smoke Bomb for the 30% bullet lifesteal and huge mobility advantages, and lastly get Sleep Dagger for the 12% bullet resist reduction. And when it comes to combat mechanics, there are a few things to note. One is dagger timing. The most common strategy is you left click out of stealth to get as many free fixation stacks, then sleep them into an ulti. But some other situations are when you are dealing with heroes like Seven or Wraith, where you have to be extremely careful on when to use your dagger. When dealing with like a 7, for example, I wait for him to do his stun first, and while it's charging up on me, I put him to sleep so he can't kill me during the stun and he can't run away. The same goes for when Wraith uses her ulti. As her stun is traveling to me, I will sleep her, and if I miss, I'm most likely dead. Also, when ganking with your ulti in mind, dealing with an Ivy, for example, usually means you have to wait for her to use her stun first before you can bullet dance. And when ganking a Lady Geist, you want to keep your distance from her as her health starts getting lower, because her ulti is really short range, being 7 meters, which is about this far. That is about the majority of what I have to offer. I think in time you will be able to fill in the rest with experience. And a good tip I can leave this off with is have patience on timing your ulti the later the game gets. A good Haze ulti can be the difference between a win and a loss in some cases. Also, I have just posted my build on the public Deadlock builds. You can just type in my name, gamerpawsitive, with no space, and it should pop up. Thank you guys so much, and good luck, have fun.